Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about a couple processes that you're going to be doing a lot of in leatherworking, and that's setting rivets and eyelets. Now there's a couple different ways you can go about doing it. The most common and introductory way to do it is just with a striking tool. They're basically just things you hit with hammers and crimp rivets together, or eyelets together. Or you can use something like a hand press, that is a machine that uses a guided process with spring-loaded pins to make sure that the compression goes down perfectly straight and vertical. If you're just getting into leatherworking, you're probably going to want to start with the striking tools just because they're inexpensive. The hand presses can be anywhere from $100 to $250 for a good one. Whereas the striking tools, you're looking at maybe $10, something like that. So most everything we do in our shop is held together with rivets. Anytime we can put a rivet in something to avoid stitching or gluing or lacing or what have you, it's preferable to us just because it is the sturdiest way you can go about it, and also one of the quicker ways. So a typical rivet is a 1/8 inch shaft. So it's typically the second to smallest or third to smallest setting on a rotary hole puncher or a 1/8 inch striking hole punch. So once you've got a 1/8 inch hole punch selected on your rotary tool or striker, put a couple holes in your work pieces. Obviously I've been doing a lot of hole punching for other videos. But once you've got two holes, you can take the rivet, which is basically just a shaft and a cap, and slide it through both pieces. And the shaft has got a little dimple on it that actually allows the cap to kind of stay clipped on there on its own, so it kind of holds it steady until you're ready to set it. The rivets are a little domed, and if you want to maintain that dome shape, the striker setter has a slight dome in it, concave one. Had to think about that. As well as the anvil that is for setting rivets. So you'll want to use both of those if you want to maintain that dome shape. Brace the rivet between both pieces and just whack it with a hammer. And voila, one set rivet. The process is pretty similar to that of the eyelet setting. Same general principle, except the eyelets usually take the size that is the second to largest setting on a rotary hole punch tool. So once you have that hole set in, you want the pretty side of the eyelet out. And then it's got basically just the tube part sticking in the back. The anvil for the eyelet setter has got kind of this recessed circle in it so that the pretty side of your eyelet will set down in that groove, kind of like a moat or a trench that goes around this central piece. The eyelet setting looks like this little reverse mushroom kind of deal, and all it is to spread this tube out so that you've got it kind of folded over and crimped on the inside, like so. If you're not really invested in having the rounded look on the back of a rivet, you can always just use a flat anviled surface. You don't really have to have that domed piece. Most of the time I put the flat side on the inside of an outfit or the inside of a bag, so you're not going to see it anyway. So a lot of times I'll just use a flat surface and not actually use that concave anvil, and just set my rivet straight on the middle piece, like so. And that being said, you're going to want a nice hard surface to drive these on. Even if you're using one of these little circular anvils, if you just have it on like a wooden table or something, the amount of force that goes down to set that rivet will actually leave you a circular indentation on a lot of wooden tables. So you want to have something to kind of distribute the force a little better. So the other way I talked about that you can set things is with a hand press, and hand presses come in all different varieties as well. We use hand presses for just about 95% of all setting at our workshop, just because it does it clean and straight every single time, especially when you are moving into setting snaps and spots and all kinds of other things you can use these setters for. They all have removable dies, so you can switch them out from a rivet setting style to an eyelet setting style. And each one of the dies usually has some type of spring-loaded mechanism on it to guide it down perfectly straight. The heavier duty ones here, I don't even think they make this one anymore, but these are both sold at Tandy, and this is, I think, $175. You can tell this one's a little older and a little more worn. This is the original one I bought back in 2005. So there's very few moving parts on it, a really heavy duty spring, so it's not like it's going to go bad on you. I paid $200 for this one. They've come down a little bit since I bought it, but it's traveled from show to show to show for years, so I can't recommend these enough. This one is one we got off of AliExpress. It's actually the third of its variety that we've gotten off of AliExpress because I keep breaking them. So, you know, buyer beware a little bit there. These are great if you're setting magnets or something that takes very little pressure to set, but they're made out of cast aluminum, so they don't weigh anything, whereas these guys are super heavy because they're cast iron. So they've broken in an arm or at the base or somewhere from putting too much pressure on it when setting rivets and that kind of thing. So maybe just if you're planning on setting other things that aren't going to require a lot of pressure, that might be an investment you want to make, because they're only about $35, $40, something like that. So in the same line of thinking where the shaft gets kind of folded over on the back, you put the pretty side down, but you're putting it on the spring-loaded pin and then pressing down on the lever, just applying a little bit of, and it crimps it on there a lot cleaner than had you hit it with a hammer, and it does it perfectly straight every single time. One of the aggravations for the strikers is that, you know, if you get that striker held up at just slightly an off vertical angle, it can bend the tube sideways, it'll shift on you, that kind of stuff. And then you end up having to tear out an eyelet or a rivet, which is way harder than putting one in, and you stand to possibly like nick or gash your workpiece that you just worked so hard trying to get nice and pretty. Same idea with the rivet setter. Shaft goes through and the cap clips on top, and then the tube here, instead of a pin, you've got a spring-loaded tube, and it's actually domed on the top and the bottom. It's got a washer on top that's it's a rubber type material. This is especially important if you are setting conchos. A lot of conchos have a rivet shaft on the back, so the cap is basically a decorative kind of thing, and so you would want this rubberized part on top of the decorative part. But center your rivet in the on the tube and below the rubber washer, and just put some body weight on it. And voila, perfectly. It's actually domed on both sides because it's recessed on the top and the bottom. But this thing, unless you're doing something really strange, it's really hard to get a skewed rivet set with this thing. The cheaper one does work in the same fashion, but like I said, be a little wary of setting rivets with this thing because it's kind of fragile. The cast aluminum does not like to bend whatsoever. So when you feel that rivet kind of crimp all the way, you want to let off pressure or else you're liable to break your setter. But the process is more or less the same. One of the downsides of this one, though, is that it doesn't have a spring-loaded mechanism. It's just a static top and bottom, kind of one of those you get what you pay for deals. But it does have a concave base and a concave top with that same rubber washer on there that will kind of help you guide, and it will push perfectly straight up and down, so you have that going for you. So it's hard to get it crooked. And I didn't actually push it hard enough. I find myself going, please don't break every time I use one of these. But it does do the job. You just kind of have to be careful with it. Like I said, I pretty much reserve this use for magnets and stuff that doesn't take a lot of force to crimp together. One of the important things with either the striker tool or with this one that does not have the spring-loaded guide is that rivets come in lots of different shaft lengths. So if you have a spring-loaded guide that's making it go perfectly up and down, you don't really have to take into consideration the shaft length. But if you have multiple work pieces that you're putting together, and the shaft is sticking out much further past the two, then you've got this basically loose material hanging up in the air. So when you put your cap on there and you're ready to crimp it, then it's got a lot more area where it's possible for it to go left and right. So when you put that force on there, something can happen called shearing, where instead of compressing perfectly up and down and that shaft curling up in the cap, it goes sideways. And so on the top and on the bottom, it's going to look like it's a set rivet, but really that shaft has just moved sideways. It hasn't actually curled up in the top or curled up in the bottom, so it's barely hanging on. You're using that 1/8 millimeter shaft, and the whatever piece of that shaft actually hung onto the rivet cap to hold the two pieces together, rather than the full pressure plate of that 3/8 inch cap that is going to be compressed together. So it's something important to look for, especially if you're doing an important, like a structural piece, that it's crucial that this piece holds. Otherwise, something's going to fall apart. Or if you're doing suspension stuff or repelling or whatever, then you probably want more than rivets if you're doing that anyway. But still, where it's important, you want to make sure none of your rivets have sheared rather than compressed. So selecting the correct length shaft in those instances is pretty important. So thanks for watching, guys. If you learned something new or would just like to see more videos like this one, make sure to like and subscribe. We'll be doing more leatherworking videos in the future, going over some more processes and tools. And here pretty soon we'll be getting into some more complicated projects. So hopefully we will see you there.